Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming to you from the Underworld North Studio in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I am joined from across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good, and happy Trans Day of Visibility, everybody out there.
Yes, definitely. We see you. Stay strong. We're with you as best we can as allies. Yes, it's, I know we know it's tough. Speaking of days of visibility and hard times, dark times. It began with the Delegation of 2000 during the Clone Wars. It continued with the rise of scattered cells of resistance across the galaxy as the Empire tightened its grip. More star systems, factions, political leaders, and militarist groups slipped through its fingers. Ultimately, it coalesced into the Alliance to restore the Republic, a full-blown revolutionary movement. And then at the battles of Scarif and Yavin, it showed the galaxy that the dream of freedom just might come true. That's right. Today we are talking all about the road to rebellion.
That
We
was
will
a
get to
good
that.
intro, by the way.
Yes, thank
Very
you.
good.
It's like I do this for a living. I write for a living. I should do that more. There we go. Yeah, so we're gonna dive into that in just a few minutes. First off, how's it going from the down unders, down Aotearoa, New Zealand, I believe. How's it going? Glad to see you
I
tune
did.
in there. So let's get the plugs out of the way. First off, you can follow us mostly on Blue Sky at Iron Cannon, also Twitter, Instagram, and Threads as well. And then if audio is more your speed, we are up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please do check us out. Iron Cannon podcast, not Iron Cannon. I mean, those are their older episodes. Sorry. Oh, I did have my decaf. Those are the old episodes, but search Iron Cannon podcasts, Iron Cannon podcast on Apple, for all your listening needs there. Of course, the YouTube video will be there. Is gonna stick around when you easy to find it under the live tab, as well as in the under podcasts Iron Cannon. Got to remember to do that. Also, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld podcast network, of course, on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel and Star Wars Facebook, Underworld Twitch, of course, also Iron Cannon Twitch. Uh, Here on the Underworld channel, we have YouTube memberships, we have super chats, and if you sorry, I don't know why I'm so tired right now. If you comment, if you chat with us, engage with us, we will get to your comment as soon as we can. If you super chat us, if you're willing to give us some credits, some Republic credits, some Imperial credits, US dollars or Canadian dollars or however, Australian dollars, New Zealand, whatever dollars. We will get to your comment immediately, as soon as we can, even more than as soon as we can, before we can. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. As soon as we can, we'll get to them. So please, we are grateful for any support you can provide to the channel and to the network. Last but not least, Discord. I will let you talk about the Discord, Joel, while I stifle another yawn.
Yes, the Star Wars Underworld Discord. We'll have game nights, movie nights, all sorts of fun topics. We ask questions. This week, we asked the question, what kind of starship would you want if you lived in the Star Wars universe as your personal vessel? What kind of ship do you want to fly and live in? And maybe live in. This week, we'll be doing game nights. Last week we watched the last 2 episodes of Andor. Actually, no, we watched the last 3, so we got to watch One Way Out and the final 2 that made the finale. Next week we do plan to watch Rogue One in build up to Andor season 2.
Nice.
And then the week of celebration we might take off because everyone's gonna be gone. We're excited. We're lots of fun. Get ready. Good times.
Here we go. Let the good times roll. The link in the description down below. Check that out. Yeah, usually in the what's it called, the voice chat room there, and lots of other conversations. That's a great question. What ship would you want? For me, anything I'd want to live in Star Wars involves Naboo, for real life, because it's always like the nicest and cleanest and cushiest, but also probably fair trade, more moral. You never know. So there we go. Last but not least, the Tractor Beam comics reviews every Wednesday. At least the last one for the time being, because he's going to be flying to Japan. Chris Abbott and I talk about the Star Wars comic books that came out this week, and of course this week coming up this Wednesday, Bad Batch, Ghost Agents #2. It's Star Wars Hyperspace Stories, Bad Batch, Ghost Agents. The mouthful of a title. #2 that is coming out this Wednesday. Wednesdays are for comics are for Wednesdays. So please do check that out right here on the Underworld YouTube channel, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, Wednesday night. We'll also probably get into the comics news that did come up last week. I'm going to give a closer look at it, and then we'll talk about it. We'll chat about it. And so yeah, check that out. Again, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Last time, we'll see what happens when Chris is in Japan. I'll be sure to let folks know what the Tractor Beam is going to do. One of them is the Legacy Vader is coming up, so you'll probably be the Ion Cannon crew there. See if Chris can jump in every now and then for Tractor Beam comics reviews. Last but not least, forgot to mention this one. Our good friend Ash Mothma. It's not a real last name, but I'll say Ash Mothma. Her panel, Senator Rebel Chancellor, who is Mon Mothma? That goes Friday, April 18th, 4 p.m. Japan time, local time on the fan stage. If you're going to be in Japan, if you're going to the Pacific Coast Party, please do check out that panel if you can. It's going to be fun. Otherwise, it will be on YouTube on Ash's Mothnet page. I believe it's called Mothnet. The Mon Mothma project, celebrating the Monasense that is Mon Mothma. I suspect she's going to show up in this episode tonight. Mon Mothma is. So yes, definitely someone worth talking about, worth having a panel all about. And if there's anyone in the world to have a panel on it, it would be Ash having a panel on Mon Mothma. So please do check that out. Friday, April 18th. If you're in Japan, Friday, April 18th at 4 p.m. on the fan stage. Please do check that out. Otherwise, Dom, Chris, Hannah, they'll all be in Japan. If you see them, say hi. Tell them I said hi. And yeah, it'll be a good time. Pacific Coast Party. There we go. All right, let's move right along. Joel, you mentioned this during our episode last week. You sent it to me and let me watch it. What do you got for us this week?
This week I decided to rewatch the deleted scene from the Mortis arc, where the Sun meets Darth Bane and Darth Revan in the world of Mortis, which was cut for various reasons. So and I just thought I watched it because I was thinking about it the other day. Just as we were talking about Balin and whatever unused concept they might bring back into Mortis as we get into Ahsoka season 2 next year. I wanted to watch it just because I remember it. And a couple things stood out. One, cool to see Bane and Revan's designs exactly if they were in Legends. They actually used the old Legends design for Darth Bane, where he's in within the I forget what the armor is called. Where we in this like
those the growths.
Yeah,
right?
that crab growth armor that he kind of gets stuck with for several years, and then eventually gets it off. So there's that, and Revan looks exactly the same. Kind of an interesting standout is I love the fact that you have the Sun, who is like this entity of the dark side, and yet he's kind of somewhat subservient to Revan and Bane in the moment. Like he is so just like out of it, and like these two, like they totally are in control here, which I found interesting. But the big thing that I think I found interesting was they are very aware, and I think it's something, and this is something we might talk about in a couple of weeks, hopefully, that Anakin Skywalker really is the key to everything, and he who controls the Chosen One kind of controls the fate of the galaxy, which is kind of one of the reasons why I've always been somewhat okay with the whole Chosen One thing, and we can get into this into another topic one day. Because so often in stories when you have like a Chosen One, like Avatar, The Last Airbender, or Harry Potter, all that stuff, it's like the villain wants to kill the Chosen One, right? Voldemort wants to kill Harry, right? Fire Lord wants to kill Aang. Palpatine, and this is what I think makes Palpatine so clever, and so interesting, and this is what makes Star Wars just cool. It's like Palpatine's like, what if instead of the whole I have to defeat the person prophesized to destroy me. What if I just have him say, "Hey, join my side,"
Mhm.
and he does it, and he wins. And you know, when he does that, when Anakin is Vader for those 25 years, that's when the Empire's in control. That's when everything goes to heck in a handbasket. That's
Mhm.
when balance is just almost completely out of it. And then when he comes back, that's when the Emperor's grip just finally loosens. Um, so
Yeah.
even if Vader had lived and the Emperor escaped, and lived to fight another day, White Knight Vader from Infinities, that's still things probably would have been on the up and up for the good side because now they got
Mhm.
the Chosen One back on your
Yeah.
team. So I really found that part really interesting to kind of see these ancients as be like, we don't know, but there's someone out there who's going to control everything, and Anakin Skywalker's the key. Control him, and we win.
Yeah.
Um, I get why, of course, they cut the scene because it kind of goes against the whole Sith can live outside
Sure.
their bodies. At least in a more Jedi sense, they can. It's more limited and Horcruxy. Sort of like the Bane tomb and the Yoda arc, which
Mhm.
I don't know what that's supposed to be, but even if it is Bane, he's kind of stuck. That's how I've always viewed it. Like he's stuck in that tomb.
Mhm.
He can't really go out anywhere. Um, but overall, I really liked it. It's a cool deleted scene, cool concept. Maybe they'll bring something of that back when they do Ahsoka. But I'm curious what you thought of it, Matthew, because
Yeah.
apparently you didn't know about this when I first said it, or at least you maybe don't remember it as easily. So I was curious what your reaction is because you really love the Mortis arc in general,
Mhm.
and what were your initial thoughts just seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I had heard was that Revan was gonna come back in some form in Clone Wars, and I just didn't quite know what capacity. So that was it was interesting, it was fascinating, and if he was gonna come back, this is probably the way to do it and when to do it. I do think there's something to the Tar Vizsla story that is gonna maybe intersect with him. I know in Legends the timeline doesn't match up, but it's canon. They can change what they want with Revan because yeah, hasn't been. I mean, he's been mentioned in Rise of Skywalker and the legions there. I get again also why it was cut because the I mean the all your point about the chosen one, it really brings up the way Mortis is about the whole saga and it's pointing to his return and Return of the Jedi. It's also pointing to everything he has to go through until that moment. It's a fascinating point, right? Palpatine flipping the script here on the Chosen One, saying we can control the Chosen One. I can control the galaxy if I control the Chosen One. Obviously, that doesn't really come up much in actual canon, in an actual story, but it's something, or does it come up at all in actual story? But it's an interesting to think about what his motivations. It's not just that Anakin is super strong and powerful. Maybe he does believe in something about the chosen one prophecy. Again, we'll get into that in a few weeks. What I also find, I mean, the one of the reasons I think it was cut is because all of that is taken care of in Anakin's vision in the cave, or not the cave, well, the well there.
Mhm,
That was such a striking image to see the Vader breathing, the mask
mhm,
in behind him. That's one of the iconic images of the Clone Wars series, period,
mhm,
is Anakin. And so this might have taken away from it, but it also underlies it, underscores it in a really interesting, powerful way that I love that they thought to do this. I love that they considered this. I love that they did some of the pre-production and definitely did the voice acting and started to work on it, started down the road, right? They have the previs here that we saw,
mhm,
and then taking the Edmonton Drew Corporation characters um
mhm,
with Bane, like you said, with the scales, the crab scales. I don't like the idea of the sun being manipulated by the Sith. I think it needs to be the other way around because that makes the sun just a character and not an archetype, not an embodiment of an aspect of the force. Unless you're saying that, of course, the Sith are trying to, because the Sith aren't just trying to control an aspect of the force, they're kind of trying to control the galaxy. And again, the sun isn't really just a character. The sun you can interact with and have motivations with and have political allegiances with. I do think we're gonna see more of that fact in Ahsoka season 2. But I do again. I love the idea of it that with Bane Revan there. If anything, it would have made more sense for Palpatine then. I mean, that would have been fascinating if Palpatine showed up. Maybe there was the idea that Palpatine is actually coming. I mean, now I'm thinking with everything with Snoke, right? Obviously, comes along much later, a few decades later in universe, but also in terms of the idea of Palpatine manipulating some other cipher elsewhere in the galaxy. But I got the idea. Maybe he's the one behind Revan and Bane here, and he's just using them as avatars or something. I don't know. Spinning these ideas out, but yeah.
And I'll say, one thing, because I remember, I don't want to turn this too much into Ahsoka season 2 speculation, but I'll just make it kind of quick. Balin talks about how he hears something on Peridia, and only he seems to hear it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a while, but when he's talking to Shin about this place, like, do you hear it? Like, it's calling. It's like, I don't hear anything. It is interesting. Like, what is Balin hearing that no one else can hear? What is calling to him, right?
Yeah.
Palpatine is alive. He's on Exegol doing his thing. Sure. I don't know how interconnected Dave wants to make those two storylines, or is it just this is one thing going on in the galaxy, and Palpatine's kind of on Exegol doing his thing. Who knows how many plates Palpatine's spinning at this point? Or it could just be something even grander beyond Palpatine right now, and he's just too busy trying to just live another day on Exegol land. But it would be interesting if Dave maybe, and this is where I talk about bringing back these old ideas. If maybe there's some Morrissey stuff going on, and maybe Palpatine from Exegol is also trying to worm his way into it. I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe not. It, again, reminds me a little bit of a Star Trek: The Final Frontier, when a Cybok is hearing the call of an evil deity god thing that needs a starship. What does the Morris god need with a starship? So it's interesting. We don't know. I don't want to speculate too much about it, but I think it's a really cool deleted scene. I suggest you find it and watch it.
Yeah. If anything, what Ahsoka season 2 will do with Palpatine is imply it, right? The Bad Batch. Oh, I mean, the Bad Batch did more than imply it, but at least it implied any connection to Exegol was just implied. Any connection to what Gideon is doing on Mandalore is just implied, but it's pretty heavily implied. But I think, with Exegol, with Snoke and everything, and Ahsoka, just implied, and we'd probably be right, but it won't lose people who, that's another thing about being a more casual Star Wars fan. You just don't always. They're not always thinking about these things all the time, so they may not connect the dots as much. Sometimes they will. Maybe they will. If they've watched Ahsoka, they've likely watched Rise of Skywalker. That makes sense too. But if anything, just implying it means that more casual fans don't have to feel like they're being left out.
Right. Yeah. I'll be interested to see what's going on. So
Man, this show already, because we weren't able to talk about season 1 because of the strike. So already we're talking about the show. We got to do, just saying this right now, we got to give it the accolade treatment when it comes out, because it's Space Wizards. Come on. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of Space Wizards, mine is something that comes out tomorrow that I just remembered. My copy of Claudia Gray's Into the Light is at the store at Baka Phoenix here in Toronto. Looking forward to picking it up tomorrow when I can. Looking forward to phase 3, wave, the end, coming right along. You can count the amount of High Republic releases coming out on one hand, which is bonkers to think now. And we are in the end game. We are in the end game. Beath Silas, he's got the Rod of Ages. He's got this mission to take the Nameless back to Planet X or whatever, figure this out. He's come such a long way, and I'm so excited for what next, what happens next with him, what happens next with all these characters that we haven't really. I mean, yeah, Tears of the Nameless we picked up on, but the the rest of I guess the vessel, Claudia Gray likes the vessel, Lafayette Hollow, and those characters. I'm not quite up to speed on who's actually all in this, but I'm guessing Reith has something to do with this one, and looking forward to that. Also, if you've pre-ordered Charles Soule's Trials of the Jedi, just this a little tip, you got to read all these authors' newsletters is what you got to do, because if you because they have little tidbits. Go to Charles Soule's newsletter, look up the little gift he has for folks who've pre-ordered Trials of the Jedi. It comes out in June. I recommend it. It's a fun little thing. So check that out. This is the last YA novel, Into the Light, comes out tomorrow. The last YA novel of High Republic, which have been so spectacular, and it's gonna be bittersweet. But yeah, it's I'm looking forward to diving in. I do think Trials of the Jedi has a lot of story to tell. It's going to be a chunky book. It's probably going to be the longest single thing in High Republic.
Will it be the
But
biggest book of them all? Will it be will it be bigger than
yeah,
like
I think
Thrawn
Trials of
books?
the Jedi is going to be the longest, one of the longest Star Wars books. Period. I mean, that's what I think. Is the word length, the page length. But Into the Light, probably not that much longer than usual because it's YA. But I mean, Claudia Gray. I mean, a Claudia Gray Star Wars hasn't come out in a while either. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing to remember. So looking forward to the master Claudia Gray. Everything she does has been perfect. She's probably the most consistent Star Wars author. So looking forward to that. And everything my guy Reith does come a long way from Into the Dark. So also what we're getting into now are the palindrome parallel titles, which we're in the end when Into the Dark, Into the Light, Light of the Jedi, Trials of the Jedi. So looking forward to it. Any thoughts, feels about the end of High Republic right now?
Wow, it's kind of odd to think it's coming. It's a coming. I just finished Tears of the Nameless, so I can at least start that now. But I don't have any books to read, so I can start that. And you were right. I have not read a Claudia Gray book in forever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, a new one. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be nice. So yeah, bring it on. We gotta get Trial of the Jedi is coming. It's gonna be a big chungus. Big chungus.
A chungus.
Big
The
chungus.
audiobook for Into the Light comes out April 15th. I don't know why they delay it by 2 weeks, but yeah. Oh well, it's only 2 weeks. It's only 2 weeks. Mike Arethi's on the cover. Definitely facing down some possibly Drengir. Don't know what's happening there. It makes sense if the Drengir are back. I mean, we know they're kind of back, but makes sense if they're really back here with Reith. So yeah, because he's coming a long way from Into the Dark, which when he wakes up the Nameless, whoops, on the Amexine station. So see what if something that has something to do with it. We know that these last 3 books, including the Young Reader book, are going to also tie into the very beginning of High Republic. So here we go. Looking forward to it. All right. All right. Moving right along. We got some news. Which is some weird news, oddly enough. But 2 kind of odd pieces of news. Or not so much odd, just where they showed up, where they popped up. Randomly out of nowhere on the Random House website, Star Wars Master of Evil, releasing Remembrance Day, Veterans Day of November 11th, 2025. And the Penguin Random House website doesn't say who's writing this thing. But Mr. Adam Christopher, who is on the publishing panel in Chiba, and despite not having any upcoming projects announced, he shared it on his Blue Sky. So we're guessing New Zealand's own Adam Christopher is writing this thing. It would make sense. We've speculated all over the place what this is about, Master of Evil. We will find out at the publishing panel in Star Wars Celebration. I mean, those of you who will be there, I won't be there, but then the article right up on StarWars.com afterwards. But Master of Evil, I think we've said he's only a Master of Evil, Darth. Now you're a Master of Evil, Darth.
Evil Darth.
So, Adam, the only main Star Wars book he's written is Shadow of the Sith. We're speculating this has something to do with Darth Vader. Anakin Vader shows up in Shadow of the Sith as this sort of Horcruxy Force ghost to Luke. Of course, in Ahsoka, he shows up as Anakin at the end. But yeah, this could be great. This could be great. Shadow of the Sith was pretty good. You loved it.
Oh yeah,
definitely, especially with Kaiza and with all the Sith lore there. To see that's because one thing about this title and thinking about what Adam has written so far, we haven't really seen Vader go into too much of Sith lore, Sith tradition, Sith history. The most we've seen him do is Mustafar and him bleeding his crystal and everything in the Charles Soule comic. So
if you have Fortress Vader, he does some
yeah
stuff.
But even thinking about like Sith dark side magic stuff, he does some things. But yeah, in terms of just the Sith shtick, like what they're about and what they care about, he's not really a philosopher. To be fair, Anakin was never one for deep thoughts. Could have used some deep thoughts. Padme tried to help him with the deep thoughts, but
but Vader just keep philosophizing Sith like a theologian. Yeah. Just you and Vader having a theological debate.
Okay. Vader and Madeline's son. I want Madeline's son to be in this book. That was something. There we go. Yeah. What did you think of Master of Evil, likely by Adam Christopher?
Oh, I'm interested. It's funny. Someone brought this up. One of our friends on the Discord. For all the Vader comics we've had over the last several decades, at this point, there's actually not been a lot of Vader in the novels. He doesn't show up in the novels that much. It hasn't been very, very, at least not, especially not a Vader-centric novel.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last one to really have Vader do a big thing was The Dark Lords of the Sith by Drew Karpyshyn, where they go to Rylos.
Lords of the Sith by Paul Kemp.
Lords of the Sith, right? That's right.
Yeah,
Lords
that's one of the first in canon. Yeah.
Yeah. So there that he shows up a little bit in the Thrawn Alliances and Tarkin, but he doesn't show up that much. He doesn't appear in the novels that much at all. I think a lot of that just because so many of the novels these days are High Republic focused. Yeah. Compared to the comics. So that would be interesting if it was. I'm kind of curious if this book has a lot of double meanings like Shadow of the Sith. When you really think about the book Shadow of the Sith, Palpatine's in it was Ochi, but also the Shadow of the Sith, you could argue, is that Viceroy Enshin Penchar guy whose spirit is trying to use Kiza to get to Exegol so he can resurrect himself and be powerful again and whatnot. So I do wonder if this is going to be a Vader story set in the OT or the Dark Times era. This is kind of maybe my hope is there's almost like multiple people of the dark side attempting to be a master of evil, and they're like, there can only be one master of evil. And actually the Emperor. But Vader is still the top dog here. He's gonna take down all these. Maybe anyone who's trying to show off his dark side. He's like, I'm the big bad Sith right now. Yes. You had your chance, old Sith. I'm a new guy in town. Maybe. You never know. We could be surprised, and it's not a Vader book at all, and this is just a big red herring.
I have a dark horse theory.
My dark horse theories are either Pride book, Snoke book, and random Plagueis one. I'm not confident on the Plagueis only because I don't think enough time has passed for them to really make decisions on post-Acolyte stories yet. I actually did like a little bit of research to kind of see like the last time something like this happened, and Kira did not. A solo happened in 2018, and Kira did not reappear until 2021. So that was 1920. So that was like 3 years. That took 3 years before Kira showed up again.
Yeah.
So I don't think timeline wise that they would be like instantly doing like, okay, we need to play this stuff. Let's go.
Yeah.
So
It's only been a year and a half.
yeah, so if not less than, I think still.
Yeah.
So like my dark horses are the Emperor himself,
Mhm.
Snoke, General Pride. Because again, or and the fourth one, Ancient Penchar, and we're going to the old Republic, baby. Yeah,
That'll be something.
that would be
That'll be
something.
something.
So they're like my dark horse, kind of hoping because
Mhm.
sometimes it's more fun when the obvious answer isn't the answer.
Yeah.
But the obvious answer probably is Vader. So
Yeah.
again, I'd be curious to see it because again, I kind of would be interested to see Vader kind of do more the Sith thing, the Sith philosophizing thing with the
Mhm.
magic and the dark side. That's not just typical Force choking, although that's pretty dark side. But
Mhm.
like him actually having to like Palpatine's like you got to learn your heritage now.
Yeah.
This is you can't just it's not enough to just have the red lightsaber. You gotta study the books and you read your Sith Bible. You gotta know all your verses.
Yeah.
Tenured priests.
You go to catechism, Sith catechism.
We did your baptism by fire, literally.
Yeah.
So that'd be cool. Maybe we'll get some cool dark side sissy
Mhm.
stuff, which is always what I like
Yeah.
seeing. So yeah, I'm excited. I love Adam Christopher. I'm just excited he's coming back. So I'm
Mhm.
ready. I'm ready.
Yeah, one thing I should do a Google search. I'm sure Paul Kemp has talked about it. I'm sure Matthew Stover's talked about it. We'll get to him in a minute. Maybe not so much Matthew Stover, but yeah, maybe James Lucino, some others. I know Kieran Gillen's talked about what it's like to write Vader,
Mhm.
and for Kieran Gillen, of course, what to write Vader. I believe it was Kieran Gillen. In a comic book, you can have thing about Vader is he's incredibly economical with words,
Mhm.
incredibly efficient. He has to be, or he doesn't need to be any very verbose at all. Uh, you know, don't choke on your aspirations is a good use of words, even if it wasn't as it was impactful in different ways. But yeah, he could almost work as a silent character. And
Mhm.
that's maybe the problem with him in prose. In a comic book or on screen, he can just be there. You hear him breathing
Mhm.
on screen or in an audiobook or an audio play. In a comic book, you can just see him there and he's doing things, taking out rebels, taking out whoever.
Mhm.
In a novel, you can't see him. Yes, you have to describe what he's doing,
Mhm.
which is fine. Yeah, James Lucino would know that. So I'd be curious. Yeah, maybe that's why it's just harder to do, I'd imagine. So I'm curious if it is a Darth Vader novel, but it's why we haven't gotten a Darth Vader novel in canon since Paul Kemp's
Mhm.
Lords of the Sith, which came out, what, I don't know, 7-9 years ago. I forget when. It
Like
was one of the first.
2013. So
Oh,
yeah,
so more, yeah.
2013.
12 years ago. So it was one of the first in the new canon. So
Mhm.
yeah, I wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, I think Adam can handle it because again, he's done these dark side characters. Pride wouldn't be a dark horse to me. Pride is, I mean, Pride shows up
Mhm.
in Shadow of the Sith, I believe,
Mhm.
or I know Pride is there. He shows up in Greg Pak's comic with a young Lieutenant Vader says jump, and he says how high. Here's my dark horse. You ready? You ready for
Okay.
my dark horse?
Okay. Okay.
Yoda,
Mm.
master of evil. Get this, master of evil. It's not even maybe a bit of a double entendre,
Mhm.
like a master over evil. So
Hmm.
thinking his season 6 arc in Clone Wars, right? With the um, the Carl Jungian incorporation of the dark side of his evil to master it, to have mastery over it. So there's my dark horse. You guys have heard it first, seen it first.
See, I
Yeah.
thought you were saying because he was Count Dooku's master. So we're gonna get the Dooku Yoda story.
Maybe.
That
I mean, I was
look,
gonna say Dooku Yoda, but Yoda Qui-Gon,
but true.
something like that. That'd be
I
interesting.
mean, that's possible. I mean, that would be really interesting. For sure. Maybe something about Yoda on Dagobah doing something.
Yeah,
That'd be cool.
that'd be great.
Uh, yeah, that's interesting. I like that too.
Yeah. I'm
I'm
quite
just
proud of
curious
that.
to see what it is at this. Oh, sorry
Yeah.
about that.
No,
Ah,
no, we're good. We're good. I'm saying I'm quite proud of that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
We we'll find out
We'll find.
in the celebration panel, and then the write up on StarWars.com
Oh
afterwards.
yeah.
But
I'm trying not to get too excited for my theories and whatnot. I'm just,
yeah, good times.
but yeah. Say.
All right, next up, one other piece of news here. Rolling right along, the Goat Party, Revenge of the Sith at 20. My favorite novel, my favorite film, rather. One of the best novels of Star Wars novels. Period. We would also say we saw this on Star Wars Explained socials. I believe today. Find folks at the Wikipedia. They bind the depths. Here's another weird place this popped up. There's a book industry site called Edelweiss, and I think it's American, even though it's an Austrian name. And they uncovered Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. I can speak. Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3, Deluxe Edition by Matthew Stover. That doesn't make sense. Revenge of the Sith, Deluxe Edition. So the novelization is the 20th anniversary edition of the novelization of my favorite film of all time. And that's coming out October 14th, 2025. Here's the thing, it's listed at a hefty $60 unit US, $79 Canadian. So they got to be packed with stuff in this for that price point. Probably special cover, probably special binding, different things. The Star Wars Explained folks speculating we'll get the cover reveal and all the details at Celebration as well. Looking forward to that. Goat Party Legends Edition. It was just on sale. The whole prequel trilogy novelizations were on sale on Kindle for $2 yesterday, so I snagged it.
Oh
But
wow! Read the
yeah.
Phantom Menace novelization.
Oh yeah,
they got some fascinating backstory on the Jedi and Sith.
I read that one in high school when it came out. Terry Brooks. Yeah, and then the Attack of the Clones one too, with I think it was by Ari Salvatore. Want to say, I could be wrong about that, but then of course, Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover is in there. But also, yes, this is coming out. Just the Revenge of the Sith, the 20 party. I'm here for it. I'm happy about it. This makes sense. It's likely going to have the Legends banner on it. It's not going to be the added things aren't going to be considered canon, although it's of a part with, say, what some other novelizations have done, in that they adding. That's the thing. This one adds to what we see on screen, right? The other novelizations or adaptations, like the Rise of Skywalker comic adaptation, it's starting to do that a little bit, but it more adds other beats and other moments. That usually is what they do. So that's the thing with this one. It's just so great, but it changes what's on screen, and so we can't fully consider it canon, but it really brings out the story in a deeper way, which is amazing to say because it's my favorite film of all time and story. I love the story, obviously. So looking forward to this, excited to this for this. I will have to buy it and read it and enjoy it, and I will love it. What are you thinking? Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover, Deluxe Edition, 20th anniversary Deluxe Edition.
Ooh, I don't know if I want to spend $60, but I kind of do. I wonder if there'll be an audiobook, if they'll remaster the audiobook.
Yeah, maybe.
Nice. But no, I'm glad. It's gonna be exciting.
Mhm.
I'll see where I can get it. Maybe.
Yeah.
Fork over
Possible.
$60, but yeah.
I know they did do a version of the audiobook as well. Well, the original audiobook. I don't like this. Doesn't seem to be like the Unessential Legends collection. This seems to be a step up from that. Because but it could be part and parcel of it. But yeah, that's got to be hardcover, because all the Essential Legends collections have been softcover, right? It's been paperback.
I don't know. I think some of them are hardcover.
Maybe.
I think they have hardcovers, and I think the softcovers come later.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, this at this price point has got to be hardcover for sure. So, but yeah, that's all she wrote about news. Let's continue on this story on the road to rebellion.
On the road to rebellion. Da, 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 da. Ah, sorry,
All right.
thinking of Family Guy. Oh, Family Guy does like these road trip songs, and then they have like a
Mhm.
old timey song that sing along with it. I think it's like
Sure.
based off of like old Broadville movies.
Mhm.
Anyway, Road to Rebellion. All right. So I think one of the most interesting things about the Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope in between timeline section, the
Mhm.
Reign of the Empire era, is that throughout every story we see, paper and screen, there is the overarching narrative of the road to the Rebel Alliance. Sometimes some stories are directly about that.
Mhm.
Sometimes that storyline is happening more in the background. Like the main characters run into characters who are working towards it, but they don't directly are going to have a big impact, or they do, and it's like a smaller impact. But all these stories are here, um, are building up to that fateful day when Luke
Mhm.
eventually fires his torpedoes, the torpedoes going down the reactor shaft, and they destroy the Death Star, and the rebellion truly begins.
Mhm.
um, in earnest. So I think this is like one of the most cohesive. So to start off, I'll just say I think this is like one of the most cohesive and fleshed out storylines in all Star Wars.
Mhm.
I think a lot of it's because my guess is George had a lot of notes and ideas that were around during this time, especially probably from Underworld, his old show.
Mhm.
This is very much still part of the original saga. Um, kind of weird, I mean, yeah, the George saga, the original saga, one
Yeah.
through six. Everything kind of built up to six. This is even when it's not about forming the rebellion's always there in the background. Sometimes they come into the foreground. We'll get into stories where I think there's a distinction.
Mhm.
And it's a really tight, maybe not tight's not the right word, but definitely a storyline seeing all these various groups, actions, guerrillas, some force sensitive groups, some not, some extreme, some not,
Mhm.
people just doing little things to defy the empire, and then eventually they all coalesce together into a singular formation. That is, of course, the Alliance to restore the Republic.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's been really fascinating over the years to kind of see them build and build and build throughout these various stories. Starting with, of course, the Delegation 2000, which is the lead scenes in episode 3, but also now expanded upon in Mask of Fear. To we get to see it in Andor, in Rebels, Rogue One, Jedi Fallen Order, Rebel Rising, all this stuff. Um, and yeah, I think it's a really fleshed out narrative, and I think it's one of the more cohesive ones, I say, that really kind of knows where it's all kind of going. But yeah,
Mhm.
Matthew, I'll toss it to you. Just what are your thoughts just overall about this what I call a meta storyline, which is the
Mhm.
road to rebellion, the road to Yavin, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, the road
It's
to secret cargo.
No, it's a secret cargo. Sure. It's interesting that this is the thing it makes sense that this is the thing that they've put so much time to plotting out, to fleshing out. It goes back to John Knoll pitching Rogue One. It doesn't, not, maybe that might not be the first thing, but I think about why Rogue One was the first standalone Star Wars story. you know it's about bringing us all the way back to the beginning of Star Wars, which is, our universe, it is 1977.
Right.
And so building into that story, building up to that story that everyone knows and loves universally. And so it's so thinking about it as part of the reboot, if you will, with the Force Awakens being similar to A New Hope, but also saying, okay, how do we get to A New Hope? We have the story of Revenge of the Sith now. That's
Mm-hmm.
another thing. How
Mm-hmm.
do we get from Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope?
Mhm.
in all the chain of events that lead to the chains, multiple chains of events that lead to
A chain reaction.
that culminate on Luke. And you have a moment, I think, in one of the comics of Luke reflecting on all the folks. I think maybe it might have been in Hope
I
Dies,
think it is. I think it
maybe,
is.
about him reflecting on all the folks that came before
Mhm.
that made what he did at Yavin possible.
Mhm.
And of course, it takes, I mean, that's part of his
Mhm.
stepping out into the wider world and realizing he's part of something bigger and relies on something bigger than himself. He's able to recognize that at that point. So that, I mean, that it makes sense. I mean, that's the thing, we all think the rebellion's cool. We all think it's interesting. They've done a great job of showing all the different facets and aspects of it.
Mhm.
Again, in light of what we have with the prequel trilogy, what I find what I find most fascinating, and this is the thing I'm always gonna think about and harp on, is the way it bridges the trilogies
Oh yeah.
and the way it, because my thing, I one of my favorite things about Star Wars now uh is prequel content in the Imperial era and
Mhm.
prequel-esque content. So Mask of Fear is instantly, I mean, it's your top 5 because it's so great. It's my top 5 because it's so great, and because it does just that. It's a prequel heavy, Revenge of the Sith heavy political story about the formation of the Rebel Alliance, effectively. And so, we can get into that, but taking, the Delegation of 2000, which is from the deleted scenes that we all know and love, and we're like, when are these going to be acknowledged as actually part of the story? And we all accepted it as part of the story anyways. Here, Alexander Freed says Delegation of 2000. Here we are, the Cantham House meetings, and we actually, that where the deleted scenes are set. So they've done such a great job of, I mean, it's probably part of the prequelist renaissance then too, in that bridging these stories to say, yeah, this, hey, older folks, originalists, as I used to call them, who aren't so much a fan of the prequels, well, it's all one connected story, and here is that connection is, these things, the seeds that were planted in the Clone Wars, seeds that were planted even before the Clone Wars, things that sprung out in the aftermath of the Clone Wars are integral to this story of Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and them. So yeah, that's my most interesting part of that. Wearing the hashtag prequels T-shirt that I don't have on today, but yeah, it's
Got stormtroopers and Vader on me.
Stormtrooper, nice. So
No,
that,
oh,
yeah,
go
and
ahead.
well, I guess the last thing I'll say then is, yeah, they've done such a great job plotting it out and figuring it out and bringing different aspects in, but it does feel very coherent. And at the end of the day, when we'll be able to look back, and I mean, there are books already written about it, but there probably more.
Oh yeah, I think I mean, we can make a whole talk about this. My favorite eras of Star Wars are the in betweens.
Yeah.
I the bridge eras in a lot of ways, kind of when we bridge
Mhm.
one trilogy to another, or one very distinctive era. I call it
Mhm.
distinctive era from another,
Yeah.
right? Because like without these things, I do get, in the day, if you don't have these things, there can feel a little bit of a divide between the prequel,
Mhm.
original, and even the sequel era, where they all kind of feel like they're on their own little islands.
Yeah.
It's like, where are the separatists? Where is this mall? Where are the clones? Why does no one really care that? Why no one has acknowledged that Vader is the chosen one? That's another
Mhm.
thing we'll get into in a couple weeks. Um, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But with these bridge stories, as I like to call them sometimes, especially dark times, especially like here's the Empire, Star Destroyers, all that good stuff. But also it's
Mhm.
like, oh, we have to now deal with a separatist faction that hasn't put down their arms yet, and we see the
Right.
battle droids, and people talk about Count Dooku still and whatnot.
Mhm.
Anyway, to be fair, we can still see these things even in non-bridge eras, like Outlaws is set in in between episodes 5 and 6, and there's a mission where K Vestas goes to a separatist droid
Mm,
factory.
yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
it's abandoned and broken, but it's there, so it's like cool. But I think also in this point in time, in Dark Age, it's like a lot of these things are still very much around. Like the Empire is still using the Venator class Star
Yeah.
Destroyer for the Imperial class. There's still a lot of clones around. The
Mm,
transition hadn't happened fully yet. Saw Gerrera from Clone Wars is still much around. Ahsoka is still very much. I mean, she's always gonna be active, although she
yeah.
she kind of vanishes a little bit during the original trilogy era. Don't know
Sure.
what she's doing.
She's
Here,
through the world between worlds and then hanging out on Malachor.
yeah.
Hmm.
Maul is still alive.
True.
Again, even more so.
Hmm. That's true.
Crimson Dawn. So there are still things of the prequel that are very distinct and
Hmm.
originate from the prequel era, still hanging around in this dark times. Popping out, and then of course sometimes we can just that doesn't mean we can't go to Naboo anytime we want to in these
Sure.
stories. We go to Naboo during the original trilogy era too in a
Hmm.
comic.
Yeah.
So there Order 66 survivors. There's still a lot of Jedi who escaped the purge or are hiding. We got
Hmm.
Cal. We got Kanan.
Hmm.
Riva. All that. So yeah, I think that is very much one of the best things about bridges between eras,
Hmm.
where it's sort of like when this we see the morphing of the prequel era to the original trilogy era even more.
Hmm.
That's why I'm excited for the bridge between the High Republic and the prequel era even more than Beyond Acolyte, where we get to see more of that.
Yeah.
And of course, Mandoverse is the bridge between the originals and the sequels, and start to see some of that. So
Hmm.
that will be fun as well.
Yeah.
So there's that as well, but also you're mentioning Luke, in Hope Dies, one of my favorite
Hmm.
arcs.
Right.
Mention Rogue One, and all the people who sacrificed themselves for him to get to that point. And I think that's something really cool about this whole thing, is to see you know, it took 25 years, well, maybe 19 years. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, around 19 years, 19, 18 years. And we think of Luke as like Luke's the hero. He did it. He beat the Empire, and Han and Leia, they did it. Woohoo!
Hmm.
It's like, but now it's like with all these stories, we kind of see like, oh, it was a process, and it wasn't just here comes Luke Skywalker save the day. All of a sudden, it's like there were other heroes and false starts, and those
Hmm.
who did everything. I think as much as you want to malign them as much as you want.
Hmm.
Saw and Luthen are also critical to Luke getting to where he needed to
It's
be
true.
unintentionally, in the same way Mon Mothma was, the same way Ezra was, same way
Sorry.
Cal maybe will be. I don't know what he's gonna do in the third one.
Yeah.
And all these other people and stories, and obviously Jin and Cassian, of course.
Yes.
These are all the characters who are like doing their things for the rebellion. Some a little bit more shady than others, but
Yeah.
all of it is sort of paving the way
Hmm.
eventually to Luke making that choice on the death in not well, yeah, in episode 6 as well. But
Yeah.
shooting down the Death Star in A New Hope, especially.
Yeah.
The sacrifice, the evolution of the rebellion, to just get us there, which is, in a lot of ways, kind of real world history kind of plays that role, where
Oh yeah.
the heroes of revolution, or just they might take, or the ones who do it, but there were a bunch of other people before them who sacrificed, and they thought they were going to do it and they didn't, and sometimes they knew that, sometimes they didn't.
Hmm.
And I think that's another big important thing, is just showing that, yeah, it took a lot of people and a lot of different ways for Luke Skywalker to be
Yeah.
the hero that we all know. And I'll let you continue. Stop your rambling.
Yeah. I mean, like I talk about the different chains along the way and links along the way. I mean, here's an example. Looking at Bad Batch,
Hmm.
uh, which is about about clones and the transition from clones to stormtroopers.
Hmm.
It's about this motley crew of
Hmm.
these super enhanced clones and this one Omega, Project Omega, whatever Project Necromancer thing going on. Anyways, they're clearly going to resist the Empire, and they're making allies. And one of the allies, they end up on Ryloth. And Omega, a young Omega, ends up meeting a young Hera Syndulla, and we can see that connection already start to form. Obviously, Hera needs to grow up a bit to be able to actually be the leader, be the general we know she becomes. But yeah, all these things, that this is more than, like I was talking about, how some things are implied. This was pretty explicit with the Bad Batch. So these other stories, in Mask of Fear, in in Jedi Fallen Order, including everything with Saw there showing up, and everything Cal ends up doing. Whenever we'll Saw also in the Bad Batch, right? And whenever we see him
and in
there,
Rebels,
and then later in Rebels. But I'm talking about the earlier stories, right? That clearly something is emerging. I mean, that's why Mask of Fear I find is such a fascinating book, again, because it starts off saying, oh yeah, this is explicitly the direction this is heading. Yes, Mon Mothma is trying to use the Senate the best she can. We all know how that goes, but she doesn't. And she only starts to know how that goes when Masamita has a word with her. Right? and says, actually, there's gonna be it's gonna take more. We're tightening our grip, so you're gonna slip through the fingers. I mean, even that Ahsoka novel where ultimately she links up with Bale. This is E.K. Johnston's Ahsoka novel, going back that far. She's seeing what the Empire has done and what the Empire is doing, and says, okay, this isn't good to this planet, exploiting these resources. I'm going to link up with the fight again, come back to the fight. And we know later on she becomes Fulcrum. We see even that nod in the season 7 of Clone Wars, right? Using how the nod that where Fulcrum comes out of. So that just a lot of different little things that get seeded in. It's the type of intricacy that we see with High Republic, maybe less intentionally. I don't think there's a Slack chat, but there's the Lucasfilm Store group that is keeping everything together as well. So yeah, I do like. I mean, to my point with In Hope Dies, Luke is also learning. Yes, he's learning the courage of being a hero. He's also learning humility, and he's becoming more predisposed, because that's another thing we see in adult Luke, grown up Luke, later on, especially in the comics. Not so much when he's igniting the green with his nephew, but before that, what we see in the Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, right? He's learned humility, because he's learned that's this ultimate symbol that he's just the end, that Yavin was just the end of a long the end link in a long chain that stretches back to Mon Mothma, to the Separatists. Even a thing that kind of a retrospective thing with Rebels. You have Rex in Rebels, and his difficulty, his struggle. I think D. Bradley Baker once talked about this, how now Rex is part of the Separatists. And that's a story I think I want more of. But I think Sojin, for example, Sujin in Mask of Fear hints at this. That Senator Mask of Fear. Now I'm talking about Mask of Fear because it's recently in my noggin. So there's that. But the emergence of the Separatists in the Rebel Alliance. Cassian, it was teased with Cassian. I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. I don't know if Andor is fully going with that, but it's still that's a fascinating idea, again, to say it's all one story, therefore the Separatists become the Rebel Alliances in part, at least, as well. So things get reorganized, things get rejigged, I get that, but Yeah, I'm all these links in the chain.
Well, that is something interesting about, again, the kind of the formation of the rebellion we see is just how at first scattered and all over the place it is. It's like, like there's sort of a sense for everybody like this empire is bad. We just don't really know what to do,
Yeah.
right? And everyone's kind of doing their own thing. You got Champs and Dula. He's doing the free Rylos thing, and he's very Rylos centric. You know, he kind of wants to just get his home planet
Mhm.
freed. Got Saw. He's just in it for the fight. They poke the bear. You get the claws. Um,
Mhm.
even the Mon Cala at the beginning, it's like they just want to kind of be left alone, and then the
Mhm.
Empire comes. It's like, well, we're out of here. We're gonna take our city with us
Yeah.
and fly off, and we'll do our own thing. And then Mon's like in the Senate, doing her thing. Bale is, he's linking up with Ahsoka. Ahsoka is like one of the few people at the beginning
Mhm.
who's like, hey, maybe I could be like a fulcrum and help out all these various rebel cells. You can give them I'll find out what they need, and you can like give them the monies
Mhm.
and the weapons if need be.
Yeah.
You got the path, not the path of the open hand, the Jedi path,
Mhm.
who's just trying to get Jedi or ex Jedi or just Force sensitives
Mhm.
into safety, where they can at least live a life and then decide what to do. That's kind of what happens a little with Omega at the end, where she gets
Mhm.
to kind of grow up, and then by the time the rebels start really kicking, she decides I gotta go back into the fight. While the Bad Batch are like, good luck, kid, we support you, but we're old, we're old, we can't really do this anymore. And I mean,
Mhm.
they earned their rest. I think they've earned it. Um, there's that. You got Rex and his crew for a little bit, although who knows what happens to Rex because they're in exile for a little bit. And then you got
Mhm.
got other rebel forces that have been talked about in like various books and source books. Like, these people were like their own independent cell for a little bit, and obviously you got the rebels crew who started like as a small squad before they joined up with a larger
Yeah.
group. And what's interesting, and this is something I kind of hope Andor gets into more as well, or at least the third novel of the Reign of the Empire trilogy
Mhm.
of like what are the moves in the shaking to like, okay, now we got to be more of a cohesive fighting force. I mean, we're still going to be decentralized. We can't really have one big super army because they
Mhm.
will die. They're always going to be a little bit they're always being guerrilla, but like we're going to have more of we're going to be more coordinated with each other. We're going to have more of a central command.
Yeah.
We'll still be loosey goosey from time to time because you got that we're an insurgency. We can't really like hold planets and take planets and whatnot. We're not the separatists in that way. We don't have the kind of money they did.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of see eventually like, okay, now we are an organized, cohesive, politically, ideologically, militarily
Mhm.
organization. With a chain of command, supply lines, a fleet. Their fleet got more centralized as time
Yeah.
went on. And that's I think another going to be interesting thing. I think things like Andor and Reign of the Empire are going to be like the final chains that really, or strings, or whatever you want to call it, that really tighten that lip
Yeah.
of like, okay, scattered rebel cells. A bunch of people are kind of loosely working together to what we see on Yavin, which and Haas and Endor, which is a pretty cohesive organization. It's not like they're a bunch of ragtags and
Mhm.
shirts. They're like they seem to like Mon Mothma's the Chancellor. She has the Council. These Akbar's the Supreme Commander. They have a overarching strategy. And that's gonna be fun to see as well.
Mhm.
Which we,
Yeah, I mean, I think that tension, the underlying tension there of organization versus staying true to the roots and the ragtag gorilla
mm,
there. I think that's at least implied, if not on just below the surface in the name of the rebellion, in that tension between Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera.
Twilight
Right?
Company also gets into this a little bit too. If you
Sure.
want to read that book, Alexander
Yeah.
Freed.
Yeah. I bet. Um, yeah, this tension because right. I mean, and it's a tension. Leia kind of sits in the middle.
Mhm.
I remember again after this is after Endor, but in Life Debt, Mon Mothma trying to tell Leia, we aren't a rebel alliance anymore. We aren't a revolution anymore. We're forming a government. And Mon Mothma always had an eye towards that. Even even as she lead, I mean, that's what motivates her to try and continue to use the Senate. to curb Palpatine's power unsuccessfully, and the Gorman massacre becomes the final nail in the coffin. I think that's what's going to happen. Well, no, we know from Secret Cargo that that's what happens, but that then she says, "Well, I'm still going to have the value in respectability in the." I mean, respectability is an interesting concept, right? Respectability in the sense of a cohesive democratic order, whereas for Saw, respectability is just trying to be like another Coruscant Empire or Republic that failed. So that's partly what underlying his whole shtick, his whole opposition to her. So yeah, that's again fascinating. Given in Mask of Fear, the end of Mask of Fear, they agree to say we can't, we're gonna all just do or keep in our own lane here. At the end of this, and that fight, effectively fight war of words, at least that Mon and Saw have, is our lanes are colliding into each other, and we have to choose. We have to pick one or the other. Are we gonna be a no holds barred guerrilla terrorist organization or guerrilla organization that is going to have no scruples, or are we going to try and bring again democratic order, which requires human rights, which requires protecting civilians, requires to not fight the way the Empire fights. That's why folks like Luthen, like Draven, make way for folk like Cassian, make way for folks like Luke and Leia and Han. Right? That's that transition, that shift. It's only possible when they are organized and cohesive and make this get this decisive battle at Scarif. Right? That's this thing that Andor is definitely going into getting. It already has gotten into it in season 1. It's going to in season 2. So yeah, it's a great question. That is the story, right? That I kind of narrated at the beginning is ragtag different cells. I will say in Charles Soule's comic, and also I guess in Jason Aaron, but more Charles Soule's comic. Hope dies. This is the Jason Aaron.
That's Kieran Gillen.
Kieran Gillen had taken over from Jason Aaron, but the 2015 ongoing,
right?
Hope dies. Yeah, that's this big organizational culmination as well. But in Charles Soule's comic, they are on the run after Hoth. They have intentionally, for strategic reasons, kept out of. They've gone back to being cells, which is interesting, but it's an intentional choice at this point, right? That they, their cells, their fleets, different fleets. It's only again they master Solist and then move on Endor. But at that time, they have a judiciary. They can arrest Lando and try him for crimes against the Alliance to restore the Republic, and that's even possible. So yeah, it's again this part of the story that I think Saw, Draven, Luthen, Cassian, I think will bring up, and to the point where does Saw become an antagonist? I mean, we see him in Rebels. We've asked this question before. At what point does Saw Gerrera become an antagonist? Does he redeem himself by helping Jyn in Rogue One? Possibly. But
I think he kind of knows his time's up. I think by that, that's why he doesn't. That's why he stays. It's like I can't do it anymore. This is your turn, Jyn. You gotta go and do.
But is he also saying it's also Mon Mothma's turn and Luke's turn? Not that he knows who Luke is, but
I would say in that moment, he's probably thinking more of Jyn than he's thinking of Mon Mothma at that moment. So
yeah, but it's an interesting question, right? Is he? I wonder what he's thinking in that moment in terms of in this whole question of respectability versus no scruples. And is he saying, okay, they had this asset, they have this plan, this proof of this, uh, at least the proof that there is the weakness in the Death Star. He is effectively trusting Mon Mothma with this information in that moment, and that okay, that's an interesting. It's fascinating to see that choice. Maybe he just doesn't have any other choice left. I guess he could have left. He could have taken it himself. To have taken the info himself, but he says, "No, Mon Mothma, Radis, the everyone there." I mean, maybe Secret Cargo and the speech after Secret Cargo impresses him. I don't know, because the name of the rebellion is after Secret Cargo. Of
Yeah,
course, it is.
yeah.
Because it's already, Mon Mothma's already on there. Yeah, it's a it's a, it's an interesting question that this overall story really raises, because again, it's the story from ragtag guerrilla groups to this organized movement that then, of course, becomes the New Republic.
Luthen, I think you Rob Luthen's interesting as well because
Yeah,
his whole speech in the One Way Out episode. I always forget
yeah,
it's always in the One Way. It's all One Way Out and the Luthen speech are in the same episode.
that's wild.
That's wild. I always think they're two at different
That's
episodes for some reason.
bonkers.
I know. Two great
That
moments.
that had to have won an Emmy, that episode, right?
I wish it. I don't know. I hope it did. It should have. If it didn't, it should have. But anyway, that because I think Luthen's a bit more clear because he's that's the thing with Lonnie, the ISB dude.
Mhm.
Like he
Yeah.
wants heroes. Luthen kind of knows he sacrificed himself to see a sunrise. Luthen kind of knows he's not coming out of this alive. I think,
Yeah.
or at least unscathed. Probably he thinks he's gonna die.
Well, he sold his soul, right?
Or at least he thinks he does. He has, yeah.
Mhm.
So he knows
Mhm.
he's not going to be the guy in the history books that people are like, yeah, man.
Mhm.
If he doesn't die, at the very least, he
Mhm.
kind of knows he's going to need to just disappear, maybe forever,
Mhm.
live on the farm. Because I think he's very much, eventually we need heroes for this rebellion. We need
Mhm.
the people who are going to be the poster boys. To rally the people around, not just necessarily politically, but just like the soldiers, like a Luke as well. Although
Yeah.
he's not talking about Luke, he is and he isn't. He doesn't probably even know Luke's a thing. Obi-Wan does, but
Mhm.
nobody else does at the moment. So Luthen's kind of there as well. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get the Rogue One novelization and see if they go in depth of what Saw's actually thinking when he's
Yeah, it's a good
dying. Because
question.
now I'm kind of like, what is he thinking when is he like, I trust Jin to see this through, or it's
Mhm.
like my time. Like he kind of has a little bit of lucidity to kind of like, I'm
Mhm.
done. I can't do this. I got a robot leg. I'm old. I've been in this fight for
Yeah.
too long. I kind of know I can't do this anymore. I'm kind of curious about that as well. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I made the distinction earlier between oh, did you want to go into something before I
No, go for
okay.
it.
I wanted to make the distinction between how this era kind of has stories about the rebellion that are kind of more in the background-ish, and then
Mhm.
obviously the more upfront stories.
Yeah.
Obviously, it seems like Mask of Fear are very upfront. But stories that are more in the background, like I think of Solo, which they do run into a rebel cell with Ezra Nest, Efri Nest's character. Um,
Right.
so it kind of becomes
And
about
Fist
that.
Nest, yeah.
Emphasis kind of becomes about that near the end. But again, I think that's more like Han just runs into the rebels to show like, hey, he's still kind of a good guy, even though he's gonna go into the smuggling life.
Mhm.
The Fallen Order Survivor games are also kind of like that because
Yeah.
Cal runs into Saw and helps him out, but then he kind of gets into these whole other stories with either trying to just run from Inquisitors or dealing with ancient High Republic Jedi who are crazy. You
Yeah.
know, there's that. Bad Batch is kind of like that a little bit.
Mhm.
It kind of goes in and out. Like the Batch obviously isn't kind of runs into the rebels and the clones and the kind of the wider thing, but they're also kind of just trying to do their own thing at the same time and
Mhm.
survive and find a place to call home. I mean, they do definitely get a good punch to the Emperor with the whole losing his cloning facility early on, so
Yeah.
that helps out. But they're not going in there. And then, of course, there are the stories where the rebellion is full on the front line. That's Andor. That's Rebels. Rogue One, of
It's
course.
literally called Rebels.
Rebels: A New Dawn.
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Mhm,
So those are very much stories of the rebellion,
mhm,
of people who are in the rebellion. Lady Princess Valderon, just a little bit of background, and she
mhm,
eventually gets there. Kenobi, Kenobi's again is the background one because it's like
mhm.
he's obviously taking care of Luke, but he's not like, I gotta go fight the rebellion. He's more like, I gotta deal with my demons and go
Yeah,
rescue little Leia. But then I'm
yeah.
going back to Tatooine to learn how to be a Force ghost. Uh, I'll come back later.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
oh, and Twilight Company, of course, is definitely about the rebellion because it's about rebel soldiers. Although that's that's after A New Hope and in
What's
between.
after? Okay.
Yeah, that's in between.
Okay.
Um, A New Hope and Return of the Jedi. So taking place during the comic book run, funny enough.
Mhm,
Um, so yeah, I think there's that interesting distinction between
mhm.
kind of the rebellions kind of in the background, and then of course these are characters who are rebels.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that kind of
Yeah, I
distinction?
mean, so we list these other kind of in the background stories. Well, in part because they have, I mean, key pivotal beats to the rebellion,
Mhm,
right? But you're right, like they're not explicitly part of it.
mhm,
Like Solo given the coaxium to Amphis Nest, and we're an alliance, and they're already saying that we're using that word, right?
mhm,
Thing with Leia, Prince of Alderaan, that dinner scene that is alluded to in Mask of Fear with another Mon Mothma fake affair to get
Tarkin's
out of
like, "Again? Oh my."
again, this again. Um, but sorry, but also, I mean, we have Leia basically starting to do a rebel-esque mission,
Mhm,
and Bale's like, what are you doing? Why are you putting your life at risk? Let the grown-ups do the dangerous thing. And Leia's, no, I want to be in. I want in. And
mhm,
she's saying she already knows. And of course, all of this in the background is the Alderaan, the royal house, funding the Rebel Alliance and
mhm,
funding this fleet, uh in these supply lines. And part of what makes them successful and respectable, right, is
mhm,
that they have these resources. It's what makes Alderaan the target, right? Not just because that's where Leia is from, but because the Empire knows that they're chiefly responsible uh for the Rebel Alliance being as well stocked as they are. Of course, we're going to see in Endor, we're going to see all the shady deals that Mon has to do to
mhm.
supply the rebellion later on. But yeah, there's that. I think I want to talk about the path in Jedi Survivor. The reason I want to bring that up,
And Kenobi comes in Kenobi for
yeah,
sure.
in Kenobi for sure. Um, you know, two things. There's two things there. The role of the Jedi in the Rebel Lights. Mask of Fear gets into this a little bit too, in that Bale, his story is all motivated by to try and exonerate the Jedi and say that the Jedi were actually still the guardians of peace and justice, and they were heroes, and they've been dragged through the mud, drawn and quartered through the mud, and they've been purged, and everyone hates them now for no good reason. And it's always, even going back to A New Hope, right? That the rebel, one of the main rebel cheers, if you will, is "May the Force be with you."
Mhm,
Right? Where do they get that from? They get that from this hope in the Jedi. And so, of course, I mean, the great act, we know for Palpatine what his goal was. Primarily was Order 66 and defeating the Jedi as a Sith Lord, but also then, because he knew that if the Jedi survive, then as the Jedi survive, hope survives. And so that's why, the path is such an important uh act of subversion, right? It's, the word to subvert, to go under, to dig way through, that's this path, this kind of the underground tunnels, this underground railroad, if you will. If I can appropriate that a little bit. Yeah, this act of subversion. And of course, the only Jedi ultimately who has a direct impact on the rebellion is Luke, but also also Ezra, also Kenobi, because what happens in Kenobi, the story of Kenobi is about him letting go of Anakin and pivoting to focus on Luke and saying
And
when the
Leia.
time is, and Leia, but ultimately the story of the overall story, so that when the time is right, as we see in Rogue One, there's find this Jedi. Mom Mothma bail. There's a Jedi. Of course, we still have that in 1977, right? Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope.
Mhm.
And that what does he do? He says to Luke, you must come with me to Alderaan and join the Rebel Alliance. So yeah, all these things, all these little moments, really pivotal things that build up. Yes, of course, A New Dawn. I mean, New Dawn is primarily Kanan and Hera. What's fascinating with Rebels, right? And I think that might have been even frustrating to some folks. I was all, what's happening here? It's a bit of a head scratcher. It's called Rebels. It has the music, the Rebel theme, but it starts with this kid, this kind of space Aladdin, right? Which is
Mm.
um, who lives alone up in this tower on this whatever planet, in this one little cell.
Mhm.
Uh, what are they doing? No. Again, we know Hera's important now, but
I don't think it's just a Hera. I mean, I
well,
think you take out Thrawn and you take out one of the.
no. Well, what I'm getting at the beginning, I'm talking about the beginning, right?
Okay.
The
Oh, right.
beginning of Rebels, it's just this one cell.
Right.
Is it really telling a bigger story? And then it ultimately does, right? It ultimately
Mhm.
says they're at least part of, and they join up as part of this bigger story, um, with Adelon, with everything to do with Thrawn, the handling the whole TIE Defender project that
Mhm.
could have actually been debilitating for the rebels, for the galaxy.
Mhm.
We have in the background, and we have with in the Thrawn novel as well, uh all the Dunium shipments going to one spot. What's that about? And Thrawn's putting the pieces together. Side note, side plug, Ash and I talked all about the Death Star on her channel. Check that out. I'll plug that again at the end, because so that's also why that's in the mind. um yeah, Rebels really showing that build up, and that's the clearest we get. I mean, it's 4 seasons, and it starts off this little small story, and then it ends up with, yeah, uh with Secret Cargo, right? And ends up with In the Name of the Rebellion, and ends up, I mean, it ends up back on Lothal with Thrawn and Ezra. But in between, I mean, we get twin sons, right? We get to see Luke there for a second. So yeah,
Mhm.
even the stories that are about the rebellion, again, they in miniature, they have to tell the stories uh of the small little independent groups coming together as part of a bigger thing. We finally see X-Wings. She's finally General Syndulla in season 4. That we get the name call, the shout out in Rogue One. The ghost is there, paging General Syndulla, and Chopper running around. So yeah, it's
Yeah. It.
it's all the stories about the rebellion are stories about these groups becoming the rebellion.
And all of these groups, even in their small things, doing big things. Like we talk
Yeah,
about how Rebels kind of starts small, goes big, and kind of becomes
yeah,
small again. Is like their big accomplishment is they freed Lothal, one planet. The Empire's still
yeah.
around, Palpatine's still in power.
Took
You
out
know,
Thrawn. He was
but
formidable.
yeah, but that's my point. I'm saying but when you look at it,
Yeah.
they took out Thrawn, they took
Hmm.
out probably someone who would have been a big headache for the Rebel Alliance.
Hmm.
Had when it was time to really start showing their cards.
Hmm.
And obviously they stopped the Emperor from getting the world between worlds, but he was
Hmm.
doing some other stuff. But that to me, the Thrawn thing is probably the big one, where they took out one of the high ranking officers.
Yeah.
That you remind me of Rebels. I want to talk about one other thing that's not in the notes, but it reminds me of something about this
Hmm.
the cohesion of this era and how they whether or not I don't know that how just well laid out this whole timeline is. The year 5 BBY.
Interesting.
Year 5 BBY seems to be a very big year for the rebellion
Mhm.
and the galaxy, and that's when things really start to shift. At least how I've always read it. That's when
Mm.
Andor starts. That's when Rebels starts.
Yeah.
These are on these two shows.
Mhm.
Sure, funny enough, are going to technically both are happening simultaneously from one another. Um, and may collide, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're all going to Yavin.
Mhm.
5 BBY, seems to be like when the rebels really start hitting hard.
Yeah.
That's when the Eldani arc happens. That's when Ezra, does the big speech on Lothal that goes
Mhm.
beyond Lothal into like a bunch of systems.
Yeah.
That's when like Tarkin starts taking Invader start taking more interest in a rebels and starting to realize, oh wait, these
Mhm.
cells are getting more organized and there's they're getting bigger and more disciplined now.
Mhm.
We gotta wrap up this Death Star thing.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously 5 BBY to Rogue One. Obviously, we start seeing things get bigger and bigger and bigger
Mhm.
until obviously Yavin. But I think it's really interesting that 5 BBY seems to be one of those very pivotal years in Star Wars, especially with the start of two shows, Andor and Rebels,
Mhm.
that are very big stories for how the Rebel Alliance gets formed. I don't know if have you noticed that or um,
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you make a great point. Um, that that sorry, yeah, it just happens to be this kind of same space. It's the third act of this story, if you will, right?
I
Oddly
like
enough,
to think of it as like the end of the beginning, to quote Winston Churchill for a hot second.
yeah, or yeah, the end of the that's interesting. I mean, I was talking the beginning of the end, but the end of the in a way, if you talk about the whole that 19-year period being the beginning, true. Um, things starting to get more urgent, things starting to
Mhm,
get more fever pitch. I mean, part of that to say, again, well, by the
mhm,
time of Yavin, things are so organized. Well, 5 years out, things really have to be picking up then.
mhm,
I guess that's kind of what they've said. So that's probably something the story group said. The story's gonna Rebels is gonna start here,
mhm,
and then to say, okay, this is also when Andor is gonna start around the same time.
mhm.
Maybe to say that they are telling two sides of the same story,
Oh,
and that it,
probably, yeah.
and that is what that suggests to me. So I mean, you make a great point, and we've talked about
Mhm.
how much of Secret Cargo is going to overlap with maybe one of the arcs of Andor, probably the second last arc,
Right.
whatever involving the Gorman massacre.
Mhm,
Because Secret Cargo is effectively an epilogue to that.
mhm.
So we're gonna. I mean, I imagine we're gonna see some sort of interweaving. We know we will see in the sense of we're gonna see the Gorman massacre, and we're gonna see what that's all about,
We'll see
and
Yavin.
we'll see Yavin, and so ultimately, and so, but I'm specifically with in terms of, I mean, to my mind, the real start of the Rebel Alliance is Mon Mothma's speech and Mothma's defection,
Mhm.
because I mean that's when it's really, yeah, I mean, and then that's only what, a year or two out, but clearly even for her own story, something must have been building, moving towards it. um yeah, I mean, there must be some sort of, I mean, I'd like to see a story where something about a critical mass of atrocities, a critical mass of star systems slipping through their planets because they're tightening their grip. I mean, something about how the Death Star is really taking shape. Maybe something in Star Wars being this weird gobbledygookly space wizardry thing. Something about um, you know, the Force
Well, I
and
mean, in my
Palpatine.
opinion,
Well,
a
and
new
let me kind of finish the thought. Palpatine tapping into something that Force bounces back, kind of like with Plagueis. I want James Luceno to write that, right?
but that's a new hope.
Also,
That's a new hope, though. That's the story. That's
yeah,
the
I know, but I'm saying like
that's
something happens 5 years before that
mhm,
that kind of probably monkeying with something, and so I'm curious about that. Also, how old is Luke at that point? He's starting to
Maybe like
to
16.
yeah, so he's starting to gain a sense of consciousness about the galaxy. And Leia, Princess of Alderaan would have been said about that time too.
Is it 5? Is
Well,
Leia? I'm gonna
maybe.
look it up. I'm gonna look at when
Good
Leia
question.
Princess of Alderaan did say.
Yeah,
Leia Princess of Alderaan takes place when?
yeah. 'Cause
Uh
I figure she's
3 to 4 years before New Hope. So yeah,
yeah,
that would
yeah,
be
kind of
around
around there. Yeah,
5 BBY.
yeah. So a 3 BBY, but still kind of in that ballpark, right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, I'm speculating kind of the fantasy, you know, the higher fantasy aspect of Star Wars that is always there, even if we don't think about it in this kind of Road to Rebellion political historical story. But remember, this is also, we also have this world between worlds. We have this theme of the balance of the Force, and the whole thing about the rebellion is to bring the galaxy back into balance. And so maybe that'd be interesting if someone's all like, you know what, Palpatine really started to monkey. Project Necromancer really started getting off the ground at this point. Who knows? I don't know.
I
It'd
don't
be
know.
fascinating.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Star Wars wants to go there or just say that's just what happens when you're a
Yeah.
dictator. You just keep doing it too long and people get sick of you.
Yeah.
But also
Well,
I
that's
did check.
again literally the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems slip through your fingers.
I mean, I do know that the critical mass of star systems slipping through their fingers is after the Death Star blows up, and everyone's like, "Oh my, they can actually defeat the Empire! Like, let's
Yeah.
go,
True.
let's go!" Like rise up, let's read Twilight Company. You
Yeah.
see a lot of that. But yeah,
Sure. I just think even before, right, all these atrocities, how they get to this point of being such an organized, formidable force.
there's
It's
actually. Oh,
your point. Well, your point is around 543 is the turning point, is the linchpin, the
yeah,
fulcrum, the pivot.
exactly. There is actually some debate among both Wikipedia and even Andor and even some of the stuff like when technically the Rebel Alliance form. When did the Rebel Alliance actually form? There's another topic.
Yeah.
Because like I think it's almost I think well some fans like to say
Mm.
formally in 2 BBY with secret cargo,
Yeah.
but informally around 5 BBY because that's when a lot more coordination is happening between the cells. So
Right.
it's one of those question marks where it's like I mean, Kathy does call like you part of like this alliance, like I've been hearing so much about,
Hmm.
rebels, alliance, partisans, whatever. Yeah, there's like a line where there's like
Yeah.
throw out a bunch of names, and alliance is one of them. Um, but there's kind of a question like, well, technically you can say the rebel alliance
Mhm.
starts at around 5 BBY because that's when the cells are now really working together at
Yeah.
this point.
So that's part of the fulcrum. That's part of the turning
Right.
point.
And then
Right.
they formally become a thing in 2 BBY when Mon Mothma's like,
Hmm.
we're signing the Declaration of Independent Rebellion,
Sure.
school America style,
Yeah.
which in some ways is how, a lot of revolutionary movements do start. Like, it's like sometimes they can be coordinated cells, but they're still very secret. But once things start to ratchet up, then they become more formalized. It's like
Hmm.
now the leadership's out in the open and they're holding
Yeah.
territory. So, you can say 5 BY, 2 BY, not wrong in any
Yeah.
account as
I
well.
mean, you can protect the leadership, right? Because
Yeah.
they're technically, they're traitors to the empire, and they have the their trials
Mhm.
probably done and dusted already in absentia. They've been they've been tried, and they're going to be executed. But yeah, the if the empire can't get to them, then their
Right.
sovereignty over them isn't there. So yeah, that weakening of sovereignty.
Mhm.
Of course, they're not, like you said, they're not the separatists.
No, they
They
they don't
would,
have a planet capital and a parliament.
if it made sense for them. I mean, Home One kind of serves as that, but it's mobile.
Right.
If it made sense for them to just set up shop on Coruscant, they would have, but they realized no,
R
that's not a good idea. So they end up setting
uh,
shop on Chandrilla ultimately. But
There's actually an
Yeah.
interesting thing, and I can send you a video of this as well. But there's in the Essential Guide to Warfare, Mon
Yeah.
is very clear not to establish a Senate or separate government because she does not want to feel like we're another separatist. She's
Yeah.
very good at the optics. And I
Right.
can make this our final point before we start to wrap up for the night.
Hmm.
This is something. If Andor doesn't show, then I think at least Reign of the Empire will show, and it kind
Yeah.
of is already showing it. Is when I've always said what's interesting about the Rebel Alliance is there are these scattershot cells everywhere,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, the main rebel group that forms a cohesive organization is a pretty ideologically cohesive group
Hmm.
of people for the most part. I would assume. It's the Alliance to Restore the Republic. That's their official name.
Hmm.
Most of the leadership kind of knows what's coming afterwards. We're going to restore the Republic, restore the Senate.
Ideally.
You know, I mean, maybe on the ground level boot characters are a little bit more there for different reasons, but for the most part, the leadership, the
Hmm.
Dravens, the Mons, are there to restore the Republic. They are all old Republic, uh, members in the Senate.
Hmm.
Graven was a old Republic Senate intelligence character. Dodonna was an old Republic, with a Galactic Republic general. He fought in the Clone Wars. Mothman Bale are senators.
Hmm.
So it's interesting, seeing that eventually when things coalesce, it's into a more homogenous, though still diverse in terms of alien species, group. Which is
Hmm.
interesting because I think that is actually something that can be realistic in some senses. I don't want to get too deep into this because this is way more complicated than Star Wars. But in
Sure.
Syria, again, way more complicated than Star Wars. You had all the rebel groups fighting the Assad government, um, but they were very loose. You had troops going from one group to another, and when I
Hmm.
say from one group to another, you could have a couple people join the Islamist right wing jihadi group, and then the next day they're like, I don't like this group, and then they can join the atheist communist league who don't like the government. Like
Right.
it was that all over the place, and then eventually a group finally coalesced, and that's the group that kind of running the show now in Syria.
Mm.
It's more complicated than that. I don't want to necessarily
Yeah.
get into that too much, but again, I think the two things that I'll be curious to see is how do you go from Shattershot Skells? Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah.
Um, to a mostly ideologically and politically
True.
homogenous group in the Alliance to Restore the Republic, which we
Hmm.
see of course in Yavin, Hoth, and Endor,
Hmm.
and I guess also I guess the question of why is it that Mon Mothma is the rallying point
Hmm.
behind all these individuals, except Saw Gerrera, right? Like, why isn't Bail Organa the chief of state? I mean, I guess if he was, he would have gotten blown up, and that wouldn't have been
Yeah.
good. I guess Leia's young, so I guess there's that. But like
So
why?
is Perrin.
I mean, so is Perrin.
Yeah.
Why is Mon Mothma
Hmm.
the focal point for all these rebel cells? And I was talking about this in the Dar the Ferric Discord. You gotta wonder, like, why did they join up with her when to some of these people might be in the fight, on the ground for a lot longer, they might see it like, oh, now you decide to start fighting. You've been
Right.
in that Senate all day, yippity yapping about bills and whatnot, instead of
Yeah.
on the ground with us. You think there'd be some bitterness there, but apparently,
Mm.
at the end of the day, it's her and these new Republicans. That's such a weird thing to say. That
Right.
ultimately become the cohesive group that
Mm.
fill in the power vacuum when the Empire falls.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
so I don't know if Andor had all the time to go into that, but I think that
Hmm.
is something also very interesting. Diverse rebel cells, but the main group that we eventually get is they're pretty cohesive. They kind of
Hmm.
all want the same thing. They all like the Jedi, even to some extent.
Yeah.
So that's also something very interesting as well, that I think.
Yeah. Canada can have the new Democratic Party, and then the Rebel Alliance can be the new Republican Party. That doesn't make sense. They're drawn to, yeah. I mean, you know what though? That's actually serious. Serious point, right? her ability, and Alexander Freed showing this again,
Mhm.
her ability to bring people together. I mean, that's the story. That's the plot, is to bring this completely wildly disparate coalition together under one bill, to all agree to pass this thing that could have actually changed the game. And it only didn't, because he just vetoed it. But yeah, there,
Veto.
yeah, but yeah, no, yeah, but that's a great point. It's just, that's another thing. It's just her ability, her charisma, her intelligence, her ability to just, oddly enough, not manipulate, but to convince you that what she's up to is in your best interest, and help you see that. She could have, and this is what I said, I think, during the Mask of Fear, she could have been, it could have been Palpatine,
Mhm.
Vader, Tarkin, Mon Mothma. She could have been up there, and she would have been the political operator. She could have replaced Masamita effectively, but she had the smarts too. She had the loyalty too.
Evil Mon Mothma. That's a scary thought.
Yeah, there's a what if for you. There's a Star Wars Infinities for you. Evil
Get
Mon
on it,
Mothma.
Ash. Write that fanfic.
Yeah,
Dark side Mothma.
Mon Mothma joins the Empire. Because somehow Palpatine convinces her,
Yeah,
and it would be a conversation directly with Palpatine, right?
that'd be fun.
Though, yeah, that'd be fascinating. I think, to answer your question of how they become more united ideologically, I won't say they're uniform ideologically, but more united in that, they all, even Draven and Luthen, they're all, we'll sacrifice ourselves for this greater democratic, democratic system in view, not just system, but norms and society in view. They have it in view. I don't know if Saw does, frankly. All Saw has is, let's fight using the Empire's tools. What we saw, I mean, this is in the Name of the Rebellion, his influence keeps getting more and more marginalized and isolated, right? What's the word? Yeah, marginalizing. Yeah, isolating. And then he gets isolated, he gets freezed out, and the voices of let's play ball together, they get a seat at the table, even if,
Mhm.
Mon Mothma would say, don't kill Galen, and Draven will say, yeah, shoot and take the shot. And it hinges on Cassian not taking the shot, which is something I wonder if they will go into in Andor, why he, what he had experienced. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it, that if you have this republic in view, ultimately, then you're gonna come together, you're gonna be more organized anyway. It's a feature of that increased organization.
Mhm.
Now they do have disagreements. We saw again in Rogue One.
Mhm.
Do they try and keep running on stay on the run because of the Death Star, or do they try and confront it head on? And that's still, I mean, that's a bit of an ideological difference. It's more of a strategic difference, but it's an identity difference. Are they going to continue to be this disparate guerrilla groups on the run, or are they going to actually stand up to the Empire and trying to give it a bloody nose, which ultimately we know they do more than that. And so, yeah, I can see that. I do think that you're right. They need to go into it more, how that happens. Because, I mean, even, The Last Jedi, this is this weird, funny tension that doesn't get talked about enough, I think. There's echoes of this. Holdo, we are the spark that will restore the Republic. Whereas Poe is, we are the spark that will bring down the First Order. It's two different things. Poe is on its way to saying, okay, no, we're going to actually restore the Republic, or something like it, but he's not there yet. And so, that kind of similar kind of tension that I think, I mean, it comes to a head between Mon Mothma and Saw.
I Oh,
No,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna
Yeah.
say I have I was also thinking about this because when you think we're talking about this, I thought about this.
Hmm.
We talk about why they so for the most part homogeneous.
Hmm.
Like, did how many former separatists did actually join the Rebel
Yeah.
Alliance at the end of the day? I mean, casting's a little bit weird because I think his backstory kind of being retconned. Um,
Hmm.
so we kind of lose that. But I also think about, or it's kind of a dark thought. With Luthen was so eager to sacrifice Anton
Hmm.
Krieger, who's a separatist.
Right.
If you remember that whole thing.
Hmm.
Now to be fair, I think he was doing it more for strategic reasons than anything else. But I
Yeah.
also do wonder if Luthen, in some ways, behind Maud's back, is sort of maybe. Although I can't tell because we'll find out maybe in season 2. Hopefully, is he
Yeah.
trying to like cull and quote unquote purge to get really dark and political here, purge like rebel factions early on, kind of like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to take out the separatist ones because they're not going to be useful to us in the future. I'm going to keep these new Republican cells
Yeah.
around, help them out. These separatist ones I might lay traps for because they're not helpful and they're just going to get in the
They're
way
more
and make
cannon fodder.
more camouflage, make for a little too ideologically fractured coalition that's not gonna hold together really well.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, it'd be like, again, it's sort of like Kira's coalition, right? If
Hmm.
of It'd be
Yeah.
like Mon Mothma's like, I have here in my coalition, Ren of the Knights of Ren. We got Yoda. We have
I tried to
General
get Yoda.
Grievous is
Yeah.
revived corpse. He's gonna help us defeat the Empire. That right? We all agree we don't like the Empire, right?
That would be wild if
Um,
that had happened.
and then I got Newt Gunray. He's gonna help fund us. He's alive.
Yeah.
But then once you get rid of the Empire, y'all gonna turn on each other real quick.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Which happens in real life too. Like
Hmm.
again, Afghanistan. I mean, these were CIA funded groups where he
Yeah.
funded a bunch of warlords to fight the communists and the Russians. And then once that government collapsed, they all like, wait a minute, I want the power.
Surprise.
No, I want the power.
Yeah.
And then eventually a single group took over the Taliban and it's like, hey, stop this. We're all sick of you. And then they took over just like because the
Yeah.
Taliban won because they were the cohesive ideological organized group.
Interesting.
Um, saying why the Viet Cong won because they were a singular, ideologically cohesive
Hmm.
organization, a Marxist-Leninist organization.
Yeah.
The Russian Civil War after they overthrew the Tsar, why the Bolsheviks win and the whites lose? The whites were all over the place ideologically and group-wise. The
Mm.
Bolsheviks they wanted their Marxist-Leninism. They were organized. They were cohesive. Um, and when you look at the Rebel Alliance, for the most part, they are ideologically cohesive. They want a new
Yeah.
republic. They kind of all are of the same political animal of,
It's true.
Akbar, Mothma, Bail, Leia less so because she wasn't born yet. Luke, well, Luke also kind of is part of the tradition of these
Hmm.
are just remnants of the old republic, right?
Hmm.
If Luke is a representative of the Jedi who was part of the old
True.
republic, Leia's is Bail's daughter and kind of his successor who was a senator. Akbar was a captain of the Mon Cala who fought with the republic against the
Yeah.
separatists. So again, I just kind of wonder,
Hmm.
we have all these cells, but the ones that get organized and the ones that form the ones that win are all kind of the same. They're all kind of wanting the same thing.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting you brought up all those real world examples.
Mhm.
None of those are democratic,
Well, no. I mean, I
oddly
guess you
enough.
could say the American Revolution.
In the
Well,
American Revolution, French Revolution, a little bit, yeah. I mean, the Syria example is interesting. I mean, they're trying to do
I
something
mean, I'll just
different.
before you continue to say,
Yeah.
in the real world, when insurgencies win,
Yeah.
it's never the liberal democratic values Western
Yeah.
thing. But then again,
Well,
these are more complicated. This is
I
Star
mean,
Wars. This is more.
insurgents against liberal colonization, but that's a
I mean, it's
whole other
also
story.
and also
Yeah.
violent insurgencies. Normally, the most radical people win.
True, and that's this weird thing I think that Ellie was maybe implying that Star Wars is going to Star War,
Oh yeah.
and that a violent insurgency isn't quite the best way to restore a liberal democracy. But here we are. Maybe not. I hope we're not there. Hope we don't get there.
Anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
well, and if we do get there, I think maybe we'll have lost the soul of democracy. I mean, that's the wild thing about Star Wars is, um, I mean, that's the fantasy. It's part of the fantasy. Is it's yeah, it's this violent insurgency for the sake of democracy,
Mhm.
which again doesn't really happen in our day because we're in a different context too. Is maybe another aspect to that, right?
We are a first world Western nation.
The context of the empire.
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't have a parallel in our real world, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, it doesn't, you know. So there's that. I think I was gonna say something to that point as well. I forget. That's
We were talking about are the rebels so ideologically cohesive?
so, and
What
I do
happened to
think
the separatists?
so. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is if anyone is trying to purge separatists, what we saw.
Oh,
And that's something we also need. I mean, again, with Sojin,
mhm.
it starts to come up a little bit early. This is earlier on.
Mhm.
Wonder if the second and third novels are going to go into this. I wonder if Andor is going to go into this a little bit. Yeah, that Saw still has this chip on his shoulder about the separatists because of Stila and because of everything he went through on Onderon. Maybe he's gotten over it. Maybe he hasn't. I don't know. It's just it's odd for it would be odd for him. On the one hand, it would be odd for him to still hold on to this, but his psychological makeup seems to be of the sort to hold on to something like that. So
I mean, yeah,
who
we
knows?
could. I mean, let's not count out Mon Mothma's political acumen and ruthlessness. I mean, she blew up Sochin. But yeah, maybe not necessarily purge as in a purge, but I can see maybe
In
she wants to
sidelining and
marginalize and
yeah,
sideline separatist groups from joining. Um,
maybe. Although what we see is she goes to them and tries to bring
that's
them on
true.
board and brings them on board, succeeds in bringing them on board. So I don't know. I
That's
can I can see Saw being more Canon father distrusting potentially, kind of like Kanan with Kanan and Rex,
that's
right?
true.
Another residue there with Order 66.
I'll say this as
Hmm.
sort of a thought, which is something I was gonna. I've always wanted to do a week of Star Wars as, but I've always
Hmm.
kind of. But now I can maybe this is a good way to show
Sure.
it. The leadership of the Rebel Alliance
Hmm.
is ideologically cohesive. The generals, the council, those guys are all, ex
Ultimately,
or
yeah.
and this is actually something that I've always wondered about the rebellion and Twilight Company. Again, you should read Twilight Company. Gets into this a little bit. 'Cause that's very much about boots on the
Yeah.
ground soldiers in the rebellion during the Galactic Civil
Hmm.
War. Of okay, you got
Hmm.
the leadership. You got Mon, Leia, Akbar, Hera,
Hmm.
those council dudes, Jebel, the finance dude who wants to give up in Rogue One. I
Hmm.
say the rebellion is finished. Bale, you know, those guys, they're all the same class. They're all the same kind of stripes of ex-senators and former New Republic dudes. Not New Republic, Old Republic dudes, different Republic.
Hmm.
What about the soldiers? What about the local pilots? What about the boots on the ground? Why, I do have to wonder where
Hmm.
the divide between
Yeah.
these ideologically cohesive leadership and just the everyday soldier who just wants to maybe give a good punch to the empire. Like,
Hmm.
are like when you're a soldier going to battle, it's like for the Senate, for proceduralism, for veto power, or it's like I just want to
For
take down.
legislative oversight.
Yeah. Or like I just want to take down stormtroopers and give the Empire a good punch in the face. I mean, I'm sure some of
Yeah.
them are. Maybe some of the maybe how many
I
of
mean,
them. And I do wonder if maybe that's the divide. There, it's like, yeah, you
hmm,
can join, but the leadership is going to be primarily New Republican.
yeah.
Whereas, like, if you were a separatist, ex-separatist, it's like, maybe you join because hey, you're the only game in town. An odd example of this. I kind of low key hate bringing this up, but I was watching The Mandalorian anyway. Cara Dune, the
Yeah, I was thinking of
character.
her. Yeah. Yeah.
She seemed like a rebel who just wanted to show it to the Empire. I don't think she
Hmm.
was interested in the deeper politics of it all, and that's why she kind of kind of left, do her own
Mhm.
thing, and she
Yeah.
kind of got back into it when she now she's back with New Republic Special Forces. So I guess she's back in the saddle with them. I guess
Yeah.
Karsten, Teva, and Din kind of showed her the way again
Yeah.
to like
Obviously, we'll never hear that story, but
no. No, we won't, sadly. But
yeah.
it's something I think about. And there's in Twilight Company, the actual Twilight Company,
Mhm.
the leader of Twilight Company, he's talking to his troops on Hoth, and he's like, the top leadership, these generals, they think they're fighting a war with guidelines and rules and regulations, and it's like that's not what life is like on the front lines. We sometimes have to scrounge for ourselves. We're sometimes cut off from the high command, and
Mhm.
they can't help us, and we kind of have to operate on our own.
Yeah.
Which is somewhat true. I mean, the rebels might be organized, but they're not. They're not well. They're not always well funded. They're ragtag still in like a they don't have fancy ships the same way the separatists do. They don't have like
Right.
a massive droid army and techno mega corporation money to spend.
Right.
Um,
Literally called the Techno Union.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder,
Mhm.
and maybe we won't see this divide in Andor. Maybe we will. Maybe I actually would like to see Alexander Free do another shot
Mhm.
in the original trilogy era of what is the divide between the ideologically organized, cohesive leadership of Mon, the Council, and the generals, and
Mhm.
Admiral Akbar, and just the everyday on the ground pilots, the
Yeah.
footmen, even people like Wedge, who are like good guys at heart, but I don't know if they're necessarily
Mhm.
thinking at that time I'm fighting for a restored Senate, man. Like some of them might just be fighting for their homes.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on like all different sorts join up. I think someone like Nemec, for example, bridges the divide.
Yeah.
He's the one he is part of a cell that does take action,
Mhm.
and he also is writing this manifesto, right?
Right.
So it if you're of an intellectual bent,
Mhm.
then you might not even be able to join up. You might not be able to fight
Mhm.
physically. So you probably won't necessarily join the ranks. If you are more physical,
Mhm.
then you maybe, I mean, this is oversimplification, brawn and brain can go together. They, you can be a deep thinker, and like Nemec says, no, Nemec is much brawn, but he fights. Um, I mean, they all have to be intelligent and aware, especially if they're more special ops. But yeah, it's a good question. All these different motivations, right, for droning up, and that's true. And that's true for World War II, right,
Mhm.
folks? That's true for standing armies now, right?
Mhm.
People really believed in. There are folks who joined World War II because they genuinely believed in freedom and what the Allies stood for. And there's others who are all, I don't know what to do with my life. A lot of folks, don't know what to do with my life. Like to run, like risk, like danger. Uh, if I survive, I get a good GI Bill.
Right.
Different things. So yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't think it is so strictly leadership and then the ranks. I think among the ranks, there's different types of folks who come together and say some have different motivations. I mean, are they? I'll say with the leadership, I'll say they're united. I won't say they're uniform. Again, I think there are different ideas of even
Well, I guess what I mean.
with the intelligence, like getting the goal of restoring a democratic republic. Yes, but how to get there, and
Right.
this is kind of my point with the armed insurgency. How to get there.
Right.
Draven and Luthen have a different idea than Mon and Bale. I think in a little bit. It's just that they found a way to work together and compromise and see each other's assets for what they bring. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'm getting at. Like, when
yeah,
I say unified, I mean like that.
united.
I don't
Yeah,
mean.
you
I
don't mean
mean,
uniform.
yeah, I don't mean uniform in the sense like
Yeah,
like there's no one on the council going to Mon every day. Count Dooku was a visionary. Right? I don't think there's that.
but he was though. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
know, right? Like again, it's like I said, it's like it's not like here's the resurrected corpse of General Grievous. He will be our new commander.
Can you imagine?
I mean, Grievous is just still evil. Just like, no, I'm just gonna be evil for you. I mean, I think I mean, I mean, I
Yeah,
don't. I don't want. We can make this like a last topic.
yeah,
Unified and uniform are always to me
that's
different
true.
thing.
Yeah,
But I do think you need some baseline. It's
yeah,
like I remember people who thought Thrawn was going to be full on good guy, which is not happening.
yeah.
Thought, oh, would be interesting if what if he joined the Resistance against the First Order? And it's like
Hmm.
that would have been interesting. I don't know if that would have worked. Like is he doing it because he's still an authoritarian, but just does not like the First Order?
Hmm.
Be like, hey, let's have Thrawn, Marcion Rowe, and Yoda all team up.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind
It's
of
a
that.
video game. What?
I know. I mean, it'd be funny. It is kind of that. I mean, again, it's like how many deals with the devil can you make?
Hmm.
Like it's like Maul and Ahsoka teaming up for 5 seconds
Hmm.
to escape. It's like, yeah, that worked for like 5 seconds before Maul just like, I'm out of here, sucker.
Hmm.
See you later, Ahsoka. Go and die. Not much of an alliance.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas, as much as there are probably arguments about how to run the war, I do think everyone in the Rebel Alliance is more or less principled on the same
Hmm.
basic values.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah, that's true.
that's our road to the rebellion, everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, what an era! We're gonna see it culminate both in Andor season 2 and in the Reign of the Empire books. I feel like there'll always be stories to
Yeah.
tell in this dark times, but I
Hmm.
think we're reaching some very pinnacle moments coming up, and I'm
I mean,
excited.
of course, we also saw it culminate in Rogue One and A New Hope, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's that.
We're just even fleshing it out even more.
Yes, the really big, almost not quite grand finale in the same sense, but
Mhm.
definitely really. I mean, it'll. I mean, if someone wanted to read it in chronological order and watch it in chronological order, I think it might feel like a grand finale. Maybe. I mean, that's the thing. I wonder if Tony Gilroy said something about this. The Rogue One is going to feel like the finale to Andor in a way.
I It's funny. I was gonna make that my week of Star Wars. If like, I wonder how Andor is gonna end and how we're gonna feel
Yeah,
because I think, yeah,
yeah,
I think in some ways Andor. I mean, not Rogue One is the true last episode of Andor.
yeah. There we go.
So yeah, I kind of agree.
That's a good place to wrap things up. Everyone, let us know what you thought of our show tonight. What do you think of, when does the rebellion start? What date do you put on it? What do you think of, the stories that maybe have things about the rebellion that kind of intersect, but kind of little pivotal moments. But then there's the stories that are really about the rebellion.
Mhm.
Um, what's your favorite? What do you enjoy there? What do you think of Master of Evil supposedly by Adam Christopher, possibly, and then the Revenge of the Sith Deluxe Edition coming out,
Mhm.
and then the deleted scene of Clone Wars Mortis and Into the Light coming out tomorrow. All that and more. Let us know. Comment boxes ain't going anywhere on Facebook and YouTube, at least. I don't quite know about Twitch, but please do let us know. Also check us out on Blue Sky we'll check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts is what I was trying to say.
Mhm.
Joel, again, thanks for leading us through this great discussion. We got all the way past 2 hours. There we go. Yeah, always very fascinating to dive in to these deep dives. Yeah, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky. Again, JID20234 on Blue Sky. I also run the Ion Cannon socials. Blue Sky Social, Ion Cannon Blue Sky Social, at Ion Cannon Pod. And of course, normally you can find me on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. We have game nights, movie nights, and more. We're doing a game night this week.
There we go. Yes, do check all that out. You can follow my personal Instagram, MNEUG1138. Also, they're on Threads. I post a little bit, I guess. At beaches.foodie, FOODIE. Check that out as well. I haven't posted in a bit. I got to do that. Got to change that. Also, Blue Sky, MNEUG1138. Please do follow me there. I'm still on the Bird app, NEUG485. What other socials am I at? Oh, yes, at Iron Cannon on Blue Sky, Iron Cannon Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Just do check that out as well. Next week on this week, sorry, on the Tractor Room, we were talking about Bad Batch, going to the Clone Wars, Bad Batch Ghost Agents number 2, and probably some more comics news, probably some Pacific Coast Party. We will see what we get up to there. Of course, please do comment below, like this video. I forgot to mention this. Share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Also, check out Ash's panel at Celebration and the deep dive on the Death Star that Ash and I did last week. It was a great discussion. Something good. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it's on. Yeah, the Mon Mothma project. Look that up on YouTube. That is where it is. It's the Andor countdown. Ash is doing an Andor countdown to Andor. Different topics every day. So I was all, let's talk about the Death Star. Why not? So we did.
Oh, that sounds fun. I
It was
actually
good.
have always wanted to do an Ion Cannon Death Star episode. So
There we go. So it was kind of Ion Cannon-esque. We got into the Death Star's
Mhm.
an ideological symbol of evil and the philosophies behind it. So very
and all the way
fascinating.
sort of looms over everything during this time period, much like the
Yes,
rebellion, the Death
it
Star and the
does.
rebellion are the two things
There
that
we go.
kind of
It's where they collide in A New Hope. There we
Yeah.
go. So yeah, check that out as well. Yeah, please do give us a follow there. Next week we are going back. We're doing similar topic, but just the other side. When did the Empire really start? Was it when Palpatine declares it? When sometime later? Was it with Maul? Look around you. It's already done. So please do.
Was it when Lena So signed the bill itself? Did she accidentally start the Empire before?
when Starlight Beacon went up, when Starlight Beacon went down, all these things possibly fodder for discussion. Check that out. Another historically minded deep dive here on the Iron Cannon podcast. It's how we do. It's how we do. So yes, until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.
Sweet.